The dignity of the discarded. Kesha Williams' unyielding rise. How disgusting. How do they let people like that in here? The venomous voice of socialite Victoria Ashford sliced through the five-star restaurant, aimed at the woman who had just approached the main table. Kesha Williams, 8 months pregnant, clutched her belly, head held high, as contemptuous gazes burned her skin. "Excuse me, sir," she addressed David Chun, CEO of a colossal construction company, who was meticulously cutting a $200 steak. "Is there anything you're not going to finish?" The question hung in the opulent air like a gunshot, silencing conversations, freezing waiters. A heavy silence, laden with unspoken prejudice, materialized in that awkward moment. David Chun paused, fork midair. Kesha was just 25, but her eyes held a strength that defied her apparent vulnerability. Rain-soaked and visibly hungry, there was something about her posture that utterly intrigued the millionaire. "How long has it been since you last ate?" David asked, ignoring the indignant whispers. 3 days, sir." The simple, direct answer made David lay his cutlery down. Kesha didn't whine, fabricate a dramatic tale, or put on a show. She answered with a dignity that brutally contrasted with the situation. "Waiter," David called, his voice cutting through the murmurs of disapproval. "Bring the lady another plate." An immediate explosion of indignation. "David, you can't be serious," Victoria hissed. "Look what you're doing. This is going to turn into a circus." The restaurant manager nervously approached. "Mr. Chun, perhaps it would be better if the lady ate in the kitchen. The other customers are feeling uncomfortable." David Chun was known for 3 things: impeccable strategic vision, zero tolerance for incompetence, and almost supernatural ability to read people. Watching Kesha remain calm amidst public humiliation, he saw what others couldn't. "Sit down," he said, pulling out a chair. "Right here." Kesha hesitated for a second, not from fear, but from calculation. David noticed a pause, even more intrigued. What pregnant, hungry woman would hesitate before accepting food? "Are you sure, sir?" "I'm dirty and wet." "You look perfect," David replied. "What's your name?" "Kesha Williams." As the waiter reluctantly brought a new plate, Victoria couldn't contain herself. "This is ridiculous, David. You're rewarding this. Tomorrow, we'll have a line of beggars at the door." David shot Victoria a cold look. "Beggars? She's a pregnant woman who politely asked for food. If that bothers you, maybe you should rethink your priorities." Kesha began to eat slowly, with a natural elegance that further irritated the privileged onlookers. Each bite was measured, respectful, as if she had grown up with the rules of etiquette everyone else considered their exclusive heritage. "Where did you learn to behave at the table?" David asked, genuinely curious. "My grandmother taught me. She said dignity costs nothing and can't be bought." The answer hit David like a punch. Here was a lesson he'd forgotten amidst decades of empire building. Victoria snorted, but David focused only on Kesha. In that moment, watching her eat with composure that defied all the stereotypes the privileged around her tried to impose, David had no idea he was standing before someone whose personal story would completely rewrite his understanding of who deserves respect in this world. And he certainly didn't imagine that behind those tired but determined eyes lay secrets that would not only transform his own life, but shake the foundations of prejudice of the entire elite who despised her. "Do you have family?" David asked, noting Kesha's calm despite the hostile glances. "I did. My grandmother died last year. She raised me after my parents died in an accident when I was 12. Victoria snorted loudly. "What a touching story. Next chapter. She's going to tell us she was a doctor or something." Kesha stopped eating and looked directly at Victoria. "Not a doctor. Biomedical engineer, MIT, class of 2019, specializing in low-cost cardiac devices." The ensuing silence was deafening. Victoria almost choked on her $300 champagne. "MIT?" David leaned forward, genuinely impressed. "Where did you work?" "Advanced Med Systems. 3 years developing medical technology for underserved communities. I was about to finalize a revolutionary pacemaker that would cost 80% less than conventional models when..." Kesha gently touched her belly. When they found out you were pregnant, David finished, beginning to understand. I was officially fired for a budget restructuring. Unofficially, Vice President Blake Morrison made it very clear that a black single mother didn't fit the corporate image they wanted to project to conservative investors. Victoria laughed dismissively. Oh, please. As if a reputable company would do something so obvious. You really expect us to believe that victim fantasy. This time, when Kesha looked at Victoria, there was a calculated coldness in her eyes that made the socialite involuntarily recoil. Ms. Ashford, Kesha said calmly, may I ask what your academic background is? Victoria looked visibly uncomfortable. That's irrelevant. I studied scientific methodology before specializing in bioengineering, Kesha continued. I learned that when someone questions evidence without examining it, it's usually because they're afraid of what it might reveal. David watched in fascination as Kesha dismantled Victoria with intellectual elegance without losing composure or stooping to tax. Blake Morrison, David muttered thoughtfully. I know the name. The company has large government contracts. Exactly. And Morrison has powerful enough connections to ensure that I was placed on an informal blacklist. No company in the industry will hire me anymore. Not officially, of course. There's always a technical excuse. That's why you're... David gestured delicately. That's why I spent all my savings on lawyers trying to sue Advanced Med. I lost my apartment. I lost everything. But I never lost this. Kesha gently touched a small waterproof bag beside her chair. Victoria stood abruptly, knocking over her glass. David, you can't be believing this elaborate charade. She clearly made up this story to manipulate you. Just look at her. Do you really think someone like her could have gone to MIT? The sentence echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Conversation stopped completely. Waiters froze. The prejudice everyone had been pretending not to have had just been brutally and undeniably exposed. David stood slowly, his voice laden with a coldness Victoria had never heard. Victoria, finish that sentence. Someone like what? Victoria realized she had crossed a dangerous line, but her privilege and arrogance wouldn't let her back down. David, you know exactly what I meant. People like her don't go to places like MIT. It's simple realism, not prejudice. Realism, David repeated, as if the word were poisonous. I understand your realism perfectly, Victoria. Kesha watched with impressive analytical calm, as if studying an interesting scientific phenomenon. David noticed she didn't seem surprised or hurt by Victoria's prejudice. She seemed to be waiting for it. Mr. Chun, Kesha said softly, thank you for the meal and your kindness, but you don't need to defend my honor. I'm used to perspectives like that. You shouldn't be, David replied firmly, and I won't stop defending you. Kesha studied his face. Why? Why do you care? You don't know me. For all intents and purposes, I'm just a pregnant woman who asked for food. David thought about his answer. Because I recognize injustice when I see it, and because he hesitated, because I've been underestimated before because of my background. What do you mean? My parents were Chinese immigrants. They worked 16 hours a day in a laundry to pay for my education. When I started out in construction, they called me chubby and said I'd never understand the American market. Kesha nodded, understanding. And now my company builds half the skyscrapers in this city. The difference is that I was lucky enough to find people who believed in me when no one else did. What if I told you I could prove everything I said? David leaned forward. How? Kesha carefully opened her waterproof bag and took out a protected tablet. This device contains 3 years of research that could revolutionize cardiac medicine for underserved populations. It also contains detailed evidence of systematic racial discrimination at one of the largest medical technology companies in the country. Victoria laughed sarcastically. How convenient. A magic tablet that no one can verify. Kesha turned on the device and rotated the screen toward David. He saw complex code, detailed technical diagrams, correspondence with universities, working prototypes. My God, David murmured. This is real. Every line of code, every technical drawing, every discriminatory email. Kesha turned off the tablet. The question is, What do you do when you have the power to save thousands of lives and expose systemic injustice, but society decides you don't deserve to be heard? David looked at this woman, pregnant, seemingly vulnerable, yet carrying knowledge and evidence that could revolutionize an entire industry and punish decades of discrimination. Victoria continued to shake her head in contempt, completely oblivious of the fact that she was in the presence of one of the most brilliant minds David had ever met. At that moment, Kesha's phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Heard you're making some new friends. Be careful not to get in over your head. Some doors, when closed, are meant to stay that way. BM. Kesha showed the message to David. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Blake Morrison, he muttered. How did he know you're here? Kesha glanced meaningfully at Victoria, who was typing frantically on her cell phone. Connections, Kesha replied simply. People like Morrison have eyes and ears everywhere that matter. David took out his own phone and typed quickly. I just sent a message to my personal lawyer, Marcus Webb. He specializes in corporate discrimination cases. Mr. Chun, I can't accept charity. It's not charity, Kesha. It's an investment. Injustice. Victoria exploded. David, you've completely lost your mind. This woman shows up out of nowhere with an elaborate story. And you're... Victoria, David interrupted, his voice laced with an authority that silenced the entire restaurant. You can leave now. Victoria was shocked. Victoria gathered her things with abrupt movements, her face red with humiliation and anger. You'll regret this, David. When you find out who she really is, you'll remember my words. People like her always reveal their true nature in the end. After Victoria stomped out, David refocused on Kesha. Ignore her completely. Tell me more about Morrison and what he did. For a moment, something flashed across Kesha's eyes, a mixture of pain and determination that made David realize there was much more to her story. Mr. Chun, she said calmly, Morrison didn't just fire me. He systematically destroyed the careers of every qualified black employee who posed a threat to the white hierarchy of the company. I have evidence of 12 cases in the last 5 years. 12 cases. Brilliant engineers, PhD scientists, researchers with groundbreaking discoveries, all silenced, sabotaged, or eliminated when their successes began to challenge the myth that excellence and leadership have a color. David felt a visceral anger rising inside him. And you documented all this? Kesha smiled, not a smile of gratitude, but something far more dangerous. Mr. Chun, for 3 years, I wasn't just developing medical technology. I was collecting evidence. Recordings of conversations, emails, altered reports, unfairly denied promotions, discriminatory pay. Why did you do that? Because I grew up with my grandmother teaching me that intelligence without justice is incomplete, and because I realized that Morrison was committing the same crimes that destroyed other brilliant lives before mine. At that moment, David realized he wasn't standing in front of a victim crying out for help. He was standing in front of a strategist who had turned her own persecution into an opportunity for justice that few would have had the courage or intelligence to execute. Each new humiliation Morrison had imposed only fueled something inside Kesha that he couldn't see, a quiet determination being forged by the very injustice that sought to destroy her, setting the stage for retribution that would completely redefine the rules of the game that men like Blake Morrison thought they controlled forever. 20 minutes later, Marcus Webb arrived, a 42-year-old black lawyer, Harvard-educated, known for never losing a corporate discrimination case. When he saw Kesha, something flashed in his eyes. You're Kesha Williams. Kesha tensed. Do we know each other? I know your work. I read your articles on cardiac bioengineering when I was researching a medical case. Your insights on low-cost devices were revolutionary. Marcus sat down. What happened at Advanced Med was criminal. David looked between them. Marcus, can you help her? I can do better than that. I can make sure Blake Morrison never hurts anyone again. Marcus opened his briefcase. Kesha, you mentioned evidence. If it's what I think it is, we're not just suing Advanced Med. We're getting a federal investigation. A federal investigation? Kesha asked. Companies like Advanced Med get $300 million government contracts. If we prove systematic racial discrimination, they lose all their contracts and face billion-dollar fines. Kesha's eyes flashed dangerously. Billions. And that's just the beginning. We can set a legal precedent that forces every company in the industry to rethink its practices. Marcus leaned forward. How much evidence do you have exactly? Kesha tapped her tablet. 3 years of meticulous documentation. 12 cases of discrimination. Recordings of conversations where Morrison talks openly about maintaining appropriate standards at the company. Emails where he instructs human resources to find technical reasons to fire qualified black employees. My God, David murmured. There's more, Kesha continued. Morrison deliberately altered performance reports, sabotaged presentations, and redirected credit for scientific discoveries from black researchers to less qualified white colleagues. Marcus was frantically taking notes. That's enough to destroy the entire company. How long would it take to put the case together? With the right evidence, 3 months are present, 6 to wrap up. At that moment, Kesha's phone vibrated again. Another message from Blake Morrison. I see you found some influential friends. Too bad it won't do you any good. People like you always reveal their true nature in the end. I suggest you accept your situation and disappear quietly before things get unpleasant. David read the message and his expression hardened. He's escalating the intimidation. Marcus picked up his phone and typed a reply. Mr. Morrison, this is Marcus Webb, Ms. Williams' attorney. Any future communication should be directed to my office. Consider this your warning about witness intimidation. The reply came within seconds. Marcus Webb, the little lawyer who thinks he can play with the big boys. Good luck trying to prove the fantasies of a pregnant beggar. Some battles are too big for small people. Marcus smiled coldly. He just made his first big mistake. Intimidation in writing with clear racial overtones. Kesha looked at the two men who had become her allies. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Morrison has powerful connections. He can make your lives very difficult. David and Marcus exchanged determined glances. Kesha, David said, men like Morrison thrive because good people are intimidated. Not this time. Marcus added, I have a confession. It's no coincidence that I'm here today. I've been monitoring Advanced Med for 2 years, waiting for someone with solid evidence. What do you mean? My daughter, Jasmine, is a brilliant chemical engineer. She was passed over for a position at Advanced Med that she clearly deserved, while they hired a white candidate with inferior qualifications. Marcus clenched his fists. When David called me about an engineer with evidence against Advanced Med, I knew it was you. So you sought me out on purpose? We seek justice, David corrected. And you have the keys to open all the doors Morrison thought he had locked forever. Kesha took a deep breath, feeling for the first time in months that she wasn't alone. My baby is due in a month. Perfect, Marcus smiled. When Morrison is called to testify in federal court, you'll be holding his son. The image will be devastating for him. At that moment, David had an idea. Kesha, that pacemaker design you developed, does it really work? It works perfectly. It would reduce costs by 80% and save thousands of lives annually in underserved communities. Then, let's do more than destroy Morrison. Let's show the world what he tried to bury. David picked up his phone. I know people at Stanford Medical, at Johns Hopkins, researchers who would be fascinated by your work. Kesha looked at the man who had turned a desperate plea for food into an opportunity for scientific revolution and social justice. Why are you doing this for me? She asked, genuinely moved. Because, Marcus replied, sometimes justice needs a little help from us. And because people like Morrison are counting on our silence, David added. Besides, I have a feeling that helping you will be the best investment of my life. While the three planned their next steps, Blake Morrison sat in his office at Advanced Med, confident he had intimidated yet another troublemaker into silence. He had no idea that the pregnant beggar he had tried to silence was about to orchestrate not only his personal downfall, but a revolution that would rewrite the rules of the entire medical technology industry. And he certainly didn't realize that every act of arrogance and intimidation he directed at Kesha only strengthened the resolve of powerful allies who would turn his own prejudice into the most lethal weapon against him. underestimating the intelligence of a woman who had survived MIT, systematic discrimination, and starvation would prove to be the most costly mistake of his entire privileged career. 6 weeks later, the Stanford University auditorium was packed for the Innovation in Affordable Medical Technology Conference. Blake Morrison sat in the front row, invited as an industry expert, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. "Our next speaker," announced the moderator, "is Dr. Kesha Williams, a biomedical engineer and MIT graduate, who will present her groundbreaking research on low-cost cardiac devices." Morrison nearly choked on his coffee. "That's impossible," he muttered. "That woman is living on the street." Kesha took the stage with grace, holding her newborn daughter in her arms. The image was powerful. A black mother, scientifically brilliant, presenting discoveries that could save millions. The audience of 500 researchers, doctors, and investors fell silent with respect. "For months ago," Kesha began, her voice clear and confident, "I was asking for leftovers at a restaurant, not because I was incapable, but because a corrupt system decided that my color and my status as a single mother were incompatible with scientific excellence." Morrison grew visibly nervous, looking around for an exit. "Today, I want to present not only a technology that will reduce the cost of pacemakers by 80%, but also complete documentation of how this innovation was deliberately sabotaged by systematic racial discrimination." The giant screen behind Kesha lit up with the first slide, "Discrimination at Advanced Med Systems, a Case Study." Morrison tried to stand, but Marcus Webb, strategically positioned in the aisle, blocked his exit with a cold smile. "In 2020, Kesha continued, Vice President Blake Morrison told me, and I quote, 'Women like you don't fit the image we want to project to serious investors. Perhaps you should consider more suitable areas.'" The audience murmured indignantly. Morrison was sweating profusely. "Fortunately, I recorded that conversation." Kesha clicked the remote. Morrison's unmistakable voice echoed through the auditorium. "Kesha, let's be realistic. You're smart, but our investors are conservative. A black single mother leading our flagship project would be problematic. You understand?" The auditorium erupted in shocked exclamations. Morrison was red as a tomato, desperately trying to hide. But that wasn't the only revealing conversation. Kesha continued relentlessly. The next recording played, Morrison talking to the HR director. "We need to get rid of Williams and that researcher Johnson too. Too much diversity is affecting team dynamics. Find technical reasons. Be creative." The outrage was palpable. People pointed at Morrison, who was clearly panicking. "For 3 years, Kesha explained calmly, I systematically documented 12 cases of racial discrimination at Advanced Med. Brilliant engineers fired. Researchers sabotaged. Scientific discoveries attributed to less qualified white colleagues." The screen showed a list of names and cases. Morrison recognized each one, his strategic decisions to maintain appropriate standards. Dr. Marcus Johnson, a cardiology specialist with a PhD from Harvard, was fired after developing an innovative surgical technique, officially for cultural incompatibility. Another recording began. "Johnson is getting too much recognition. Doctors are specifically asking to work with him. This can't go on." Morrison tried to slip out the side, but David Chun was there, filming everything. "Leaving early, Blake?" he asked loudly. 15 minutes ago, Kesha announced, federal agents arrive at the Advanced Med offices with search and seizure warrants. The company is under investigation for systematic discrimination, violation of federal contracts, and scientific fraud. Morrison turned pale as a ghost. His phone vibrated incessantly. It was his superiors, investors, lawyers. "But what makes me most proud," Kesha continued, gently rocking her daughter, "is that the research they try to bury is being implemented in public hospitals starting next month, thanks to the investment and support of people who believe that intelligence has no color." David Chun took the stage. "My company is funding the mass production of these devices. We estimate that we will save 500,000 lives annually, primarily in underserved communities." The audience rose to its feet in ovation. Morrison was completely isolated. Marcus Webb approached Morrison with a stack of documents. Blake Morrison, you're being federally prosecuted for racial discrimination, witness intimidation, and violation of the Civil Rights Act. Your assets have been frozen. This is persecution, Morrison stammered. I am the victim of a conspiracy. Conspiracy? Kesha said into the microphone. Mr. Morrison, conspiracy is when 12 highly qualified people are systematically sabotaged because their skin isn't the color you deem appropriate. This is justice. Morrison tried one last desperate card. You don't know who you're messing with. I have powerful connections. David Chun laughed loudly. Blake, your powerful connections just cut all ties with you. Your company lost $300 million in federal contracts in the last 2 hours. The board of directors is meeting right now to vote on your dismissal. Morrison's phone rang. It was his assistant. Mr. Morrison, the board has decided you have been fired for cause, without severance. Your corporate account has been canceled. Your car has been impounded, and security is removing your belongings. Morrison collapsed into a chair. Reality finally hit him. In a few hours, he had lost his job, his reputation, his money, and his freedom, all because he completely underestimated the pregnant woman he had tried to silence. Ladies and gentlemen, Kesha concluded, her daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, I dedicate this research to all the brilliant minds that have been silenced by prejudice. Today, we have proven that true excellence always finds a way to shine. The ovation was deafening. Morrison was escorted out by federal agents while the woman he had called inadequate received job offers from top universities and companies. As the applause continued, one question remained. Was it possible that such profound injustice could truly be transformed into a positive force for systemic change? More importantly, how many other brilliant minds were still being silenced by prejudice, just waiting for the opportunity to show that true greatness knows no color, social class, or any barrier imposed by those who fear the excellence of others? 2 years later, Dr. Kesha Williams signed a contract that would take her pacemaker technology to 40 countries. Her company was worth $50 million and had already saved 200,000 lives. Sophia, now 2, played in the Stanford Medical Innovation Center office as her mother closed global deals. Dr. Williams, said her representative, your impact is measurable and extraordinary. Across town, Blake Morrison left another failed job interview. 2 years after his fall, no company would hire him. His powerful connections had evaporated when the recordings went public. Morrison now lived in a small apartment, supported by a part-time telemarketing job. His wife had filed for divorce. His children refused to speak to him, and Advanced Med had closed, paying $800 million in damages. That same day, Kesha received an emotional call. Dr. Williams, this is Jessica, the black engineering student from MIT. Because of your story, I got a full scholarship, and now I'm developing technology for rural communities. Calls like this came in daily. Kesha's story had inspired an entire generation of young minority scientists. Victoria Ashford also faced consequences. After her prejudice statements went viral, she was expelled from all high society councils. Even her own family publicly rejected her. Marcus Webb used the case to found the National Center for Combating Corporate Discrimination, reforming hiring practices at hundreds of companies, and shutting down 17 discriminatory corporations. That night, putting Sophia to bed in her Palo Alto home, Kesha looked out the window, a world away from sleeping in shelters. On the table lay her new research, artificial intelligence to detect bias in hiring processes. Kesha's real victory wasn't destroying Morrison or becoming a millionaire. It was proving that excellence is no color, that intelligence knows no social class, and that the greatest injustices sometimes become the most powerful opportunities. Morrison tried to silence her because he feared her brilliance. Victoria despised her because she couldn't see beyond her prejudice. Both learned the hard way that underestimating someone based on appearances is the most costly mistake possible. 2 years ago, Kesha was a pregnant beggar asking for scraps. Today, she feeds hope to millions who face discrimination, proving that when you turn pain into purpose, there is no limit to what you can achieve. The lesson she taught the world is revolutionary. The best revenge is not to destroy those who hurt you, It is to build something so extraordinary that they spend the rest of their lives regretting the opportunity they missed to be on your side.